Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Joanne Stevens, and this is welcome to our Thursday call-in show for mobile home park and mobile home business participants. And we have a very special show today because we have two industry icons that are going to speak to us about mobile home park development and mobile home park expansions, as well as mobile home park rebuilding. And I'm going to, that's Don Westphal of Rochester, Michigan, and Roderick Knoll of the Denver, Colorado area. So I'm going to introduce both of them in a minute, but before I do, I want to let our listeners know a few things. Number one, the Las Vegas Congress and Expo is May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. It's still, there's still time to register. Tuesday, May 2nd is the forum, educational forum, where they have two tracks. This year, one is general operations, and the other one is the mobile home park development seminar, which our guests today, Roderick and Don, will put on that seminar, and they're going to talk to us about a little bit more in detail of what they will be covering there. And so if you're interested in getting more information or registering, you can go to my website, joannemstevens.com. Click on Save the Date up at the top of the front page, and you'll see the website, Congress and Expo, that you can click on to get more information and to register. That website, again, is joannemstevens.com. Also, December 10th and 11th in Cedar Rapids is our Mobile Home Park Owner Symposium. And at that point, at that event, we're going to have a workshop on the value of mobile home parks. We're also going to have some appraisers at the event, and we are also going to have an accountant who will talk to us about capital gains taxes and how to figure your capital gains. So if you do sell your property, you'll know what the gain could possibly be. So December 10th and 11th in Cedar Rapids, we'll be having more information on that. Also, all of the newsletters are on the website, so you can click on that, or if you want the newsletter mailed to you or emailed to you, just let us know that, and we'll be happy to do that. We also are having a lot of mobile home park owners ask us to do a real estate review of their property. What's a real estate review? That is a market analysis of what is your property worth in today's market. And that is a free complimentary real estate review. There's no obligation. So if that's something you would like to have, or know somebody who might like to have that, just let us know. Nobody's going to, do a lot of, ask them to list the property or anything like that. But I am a firm believer that people ought to know the value of their mobile home parks. So without any further ado, and I'm going to introduce our guests today, Roderick Knoll and Don, and during their presentation, if you want to ask a question or make a comment, just push *6 to be unmuted. So I'm going to introduce Roderick, and Roderick has been in this business for a while, both as a developer and an investor and a broker and a consultant. He has, I've always heard excellent things about Roderick in his capacity as a consultant and a broker, and he has done some significant transactions and sales over the year. He's top notch. If you need to need a broker, or you need have some situation with your park that you need some expert advice on, or you know, a special consultant, you ought to get a hold of Roderick, and he will give his contact information here in a moment. Our second speaker is Don Westphal, and what can anybody really say about a legend in the industry? Don has been designing mobile home parks for probably about 30 years at least, and that he designs beautiful parks. He's very plugged into the requirements of states and local municipalities, and he's also very good at working with those municipalities to get the zoning and the permitting needed. So for anybody out there who is thinking about building a park, or wants to do an expansion on a park that they have, and needs to know the ins and outs, or is having a little bit of a challenge with the local city council, I highly recommend Don Westphal. So let's start with Don and Roderick, and I want to mention again that they will be putting on a full day seminar on Tuesday, May 2nd in Las Vegas on developing mobile home parks. Last year I attended that their full day seminar, and it was an excellent use of my time to learn the strategies and learn what you can do with developing. And they are chock full of ideas and tips and know-how that most park owners don't have a clue about. So, so let's do kind of an overview of, you know, why we're doing this, why even do this seminar, because I have a feeling most people, park owners listening to this, aren't really seeing too many mobile home parks being built in their markets. So Don, let's start with you. Well, I think this, why are we offering this seminar in 2017? And Don, if you need to be unmuted, it's *6. Roderick, let's start with you. Maybe Don
Sure.
is going to join us here in a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me now, Joanne?
Oh, now we
Yes,
can.
yes,
Good.
okay, yeah. Okay,
Great.
so
Okay,
Don Westphal is on the phone with us. So Don, did you hear the question about why now? Why are we
Sure.
doing this seminar in 2017?
You know, MHI has been doing these seminars for probably well over 20 years. Roderick and I have been in the process forever. In the early days, these seminars were held at different locations around the country, and then once we settled on Las Vegas as the location for our annual get-together, we decided and began to use these seminars as a way to not only bring current owners and developers up to date in terms of the manufactured housing industry, but also to introduce people new to the industry that need the really down and dirty one-day seminar to give them the full range of what's available out there for a developer, and how to go about making it work with factory-built housing. 5 or 6 years ago, when the market was down and the industry was down, you know, we laid off the seminars because there just wasn't that much interest in development. But about 4 years ago, it became evident to us from the number of people visiting the Congress who had never been in the industry before and were coming by our booth and talking to various industry people about how to go about getting in. And Roderick and I thought that it was a perfect opportunity for MHI and for the two of us to begin to contribute again to building a knowledge base for people who want to develop with factory-built housing. So I think it's critical. Many people who come from outside, and a lot of manufactured housing people, to be short, really don't understand that there's definitely a different process involved in getting a project built using factory-built housing, particularly where it involves a land lease community. Most local engineers who do a lot of the early design work for manufactured home communities are used to doing subdivisions and all of the requirements that are necessary to make a subdivision work, where we're actually selling the lots and have to put everything in easements and the road right-of-ways and so forth. Whereas with manufactured housing, we have an ability to be creative in terms of the design of utilities. There's specific items in terms of lot size and setbacks and so forth, where the yard areas are, that are very important for us to know, and could save us as much as 40% in the development cost of a community. Designing it and doing the engineering and layout of the sewer and utilities in a way that's advantageous to a manufactured housing land lease community.
Wow, so, Don, I want to stop you there for a second and just make sure I heard you correctly. So you're saying that building a park is not like building a subdivision. And then what was that about the 40% savings? Could you? Well,
in most subdivisions, all of the sewer and water lines end up being dedicated to the public. And as such, they have to be in the right-of-way where the public or the municipality who owns those sewer and water lines can get to them without having to enter in somebody else's lot. If you're a land lease community owner, you own the whole property. Your whole piece of property is one big easement. And then the design of sewer and water is transplanted from being in the right-of-way in the street, where the length of the laterals to get by, where the hookups are for both sewer and water are longer, and also where in many cases subdivisions treat the rear yard as a play yard for a residential home. We use a side yard, so that has to do with the amount of area that's necessary in the front and rear setbacks versus the side yard setback. And so when you put all this together, if you design a land lease community utilizing the very best techniques and reducing the length of runs of sewer, water, and sometimes even the streets, that we can have a substantial savings in the cost of construction by doing it the unique manufactured housing way versus the typical subdivision way that a lot of local engineers are used to doing.
So let me ask Roderick a question here, because I think, you know, what happens in business so many times that people think, well, an engineer is an engineer, that we all, you know, every engineer knows all of these, you know, can design a park as well as the other one, and is aware of this. So Roderick, what have you seen in your career in terms of development and mobile home park developers just hiring their local engineer to design a park?
It's usually a disaster.
And how
the local engineer does not understand our product, and they don't understand our industry, and so they typically have single family experience, and so in single family sensibilities, they bring those sensibilities to our industry, and they don't work. But it's worse than that. It doesn't work, but they don't understand that it doesn't work. And then if you have a first-time developer who's new to our industry, then they're usually down the road before they realize it doesn't work. And I'm sure Don would agree with me. Either one of us can be in the car and drive through a community, and we can tell if it was designed by someone who understood our industry or someone who did not.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
You know, Yeah, Joanne, it even goes back to the old days where everybody designed manufactured home lots on an angle so you could hook it up to your pickup truck and take off in the dead of night. Okay.
Is that
Well,
now? I never knew that that was why they were. Is that the reason why? I got to write this down. Is that why?
Well, it was based on the fact that everybody thought you had to have the lots at an angle so you could back them in there real easy. Well,
Sure.
you could go into it and find out. There's even a key to how the angle goes. We could design, if it's designed correctly, the house, the living door, the entry door to the house faces out towards the street with the long view. If you design the angle the wrong way, the door looks at the what used to be the old water heater door on the back side of the next house, not the long view down the street. It's a simple thing, but most engineers have never been in one of our houses, never been underneath one, understands where the utilities come in and so forth.
Sure.
And just this is 50 years for me. I designed my first manufactured home community in 1964 as a grad student at the University of Illinois. So, you know, there's a lot of bad zoning hearings under my belt, and a lot of wonderful projects that we can point to that show what sensibility and understanding our product can do. One other thing, and saving in the construction of a manufactured home park is important. And to me, that is important because what you bury under the ground doesn't give you any benefit whatsoever from a marketing perspective. It's what you do above the ground in landscaping, in image work, in providing amenities that make this a wonderful place for people to live. And so I'd like to believe that saving this money in the construction of the park allows us to have more money left over to make it a more livable place for our residents.
Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it, to have that? Every park owner in the U.S. needs to do their bit in helping to improve the image. I mean, these images are not going to change overnight, or the public perception, or the city council perceptions. It's going to take all of us, one park at a time, doing what we can in terms of appearance of the homes and of the landscaping and the entrance to the properties, if there is a community building, and so on. So, but getting back to the development, let me ask you both, what is your geographic range? Do you mostly work in your markets, or if somebody is listening and wants to hire you and they live in their properties in the land they want to develop is in Florida or Washington State, can you help them?
I've worked in 35 states, probably.
Oh my.
100 different market areas. So,
you know, and I've currently have a project going in Delaware, which is East Coast, and another one going in upstate California, actually McKinleyville, which is, you know, just south of the actually about as far north as you can get in California. So we operate all around the country, and for me, the layout and making it fit the property is the important part. And then we take that one step further, because most of these projects will ultimately need a local engineer to participate in getting the permits. But we not only do an initial plot plan, site plan, and detail out how the various site uses need to be, but also guide the engineer in the most efficient placement of the sewer and water and the utilities. So, and sometimes we get a local engineer who'll balk at the out-of-towner, particularly a landscape architect, telling them how to do their job. But I've always believed that at the end, it's our responsibility to give our client the very best product that's possible. And when I leave town, he's the new mobile home park expert, and live with it and enjoy it.
Right. So I'm going to interrupt for just a second here, and I'm going to ask both of you for your contact information to tell our listeners, and it will also be in our next newsletter, and also this we put a PowerPoint of this on YouTube after we're finished, so that anybody can reference this. This being recorded, and they can reference this show afterwards. So Roderick, let's start with you. Let's have your website, if you have one, your email, and your phone number in case one of our listeners wants to contact you.
Well, the best way is just call me on the phone, which is 303-641-7227, 303-641-7227. And then if you want to email me, it's my name at gmail.com. So that's RODERICKKNOLL Those are the two best ways to reach me.
Great, great. And Don, how about you?
Well, there's a number of ways you can do that. First of all, I have a website. It is D as in Donald, C as in Charles, DC Westphal. That's WESTPHAL.com. And you can get to me through the website. And the interesting thing about my website is that there's a number of articles on it and illustrations of the various projects that we've done. That's kind of fun to look at. The other way is to email me, and it's don@dcwestphal.com. And then my phone number is 248-651-5518. And I'll even give you my cell number, which is 248-379-8200.
Great. So Don and Roderick, in addition to the one-day seminar, the developer seminar on May 2nd, will you also be available on Wednesday and Thursday in case people want to talk to you or meet with you at the Congress?
I set aside the Wednesday for half-hour meetings, no cost, no obligation, and I typically have a sign-up sheet, and we meet in one of the restaurants there in the hotel, and we can talk for 30 minutes about whatever you'd like to talk about, something technical, or if you want to talk about a pro forma, or if you have a pro forma and want a second opinion, bring your pro forma with you. If you have a market study and you want a second opinion, bring your market study with you, and we can look at those documents. Or if you haven't gotten that far and just want to talk about a concept for a project in general, bring what you have, and we'll go over that.
Great, great. So that's a huge advantage that people can actually meet with you and talk about what they have in mind to develop or expand a community.
Yep.
And Don, how about you? Tell us what your availability will be.
One of the interesting things that we put into the developer seminar years ago was a kind of meet the experts at the very end of the day. And we invite people who have a site plan, or as Roderick said, have a pro forma or something, market study. We can't spend a lot of time with everybody, but it's kind of fun because the ones we can get to, we find people gathered around a table and listening and learning, which is one of the big advantages of the whole Congress, is a tremendous opportunity to network with people in that venue. But I have had a booth at the in the exhibit area at the Congress since the very beginning, and so anybody could drop by my booth and spend some time. We have some site plans there and some other ability to discuss with people, and we usually talk to 3 or 4 people who we end up doing some design work for at the end of the Congress. So there's a great amount of wealth to be handed at the Congress, just with the networking, and then especially with Roderick and I and our development seminar and our availability during the rest of the Congress.
So, Roderick and Don, there's two things I want to be sure that we cover today. And I want to remind our listeners if they have a question or for Don or Roderick to hit *6 to be unmuted and ask a question. So, but the thing that I wanted to get to is number one, are there actually parks, any parks being built in the United States today, and park owners or community owners expanding their existing parks? And number two, do you help or do you handle the rezoning process, which is the real elephant in the room? So Don, let's start with you. You said you are working on a project in Delaware. Is that something current?
Yeah, I have the bulk of my work, Joanne, in the last few years has been expansion of existing units, and
Sure.
and that's because it's a whole lot easier to expand an existing project than it is to site one in the midst of other developments in a municipality. David Alley and I wrote a book called Navigating the Manufactured Housing Zoning Process years ago, and I have copies of those books available, and we'll have them at the Congress, and someone could purchase one from me by going to my website or calling me. But yes, it's interesting because, you know, there was this tremendous frenzy to buy up existing communities over the last 5 years or so. And as you know, Joanne, the number of decent communities that are available on the marketplace today is not growing. And so becomes a point in time where we can no longer be buying existing communities to fill up and expanding older communities. But now we're talking about you know, out of the ground new projects, and it's a scary process because of the zoning. But the worst thing that can happen is someone contact me after they've been turned down in a process. The real work happens before we get to a public hearing and so forth. Yes. So, you know, the advantage of hiring somebody who understands, has been beat up across the country for 40 years or more, is to know the process and understand what really hard work goes into to making a rezoning happen. And the best part is that when you're successful, you've made a lot of money.
That's right. And I will just make a quick comment because we only have a few minutes left here, that Don is absolutely right that probably 2 to 3 years ago, the market prices, if you look at a per site basis, you know, there's the overall price that a park sells for, but you break it down, what did it sell for per site? Many, many, many times you could build that site for what it costs to buy it. And sometimes those sites are 40-year-old sites, so you know that the utilities and the streets are getting to the end of either are close to getting to the end of their useful life. So the time is very good to be looking at building. And Roderick, how about you? What are you seeing in terms?
So, yeah, you know, when we went through the Great Recession, you know, no one's going to build a new property in the middle of a recession.
Right.
I mean, that just wouldn't make any sense. And we had vacancy. So, you know, the first thing we had to do as an industry is fill up our vacant sites. Right. And that took several years. You know, I mean, remember, Joanne, how many vacancies do we have in 08, 09, 10,
yeah.
11?
Staggering, you know, amounts.
Yeah, and not only did we have vacancy, but we were still having loan defaults by residents and repossessions. And so I think like in 11 and 12, many of my clients worked real hard on site selling houses, and you know, they would celebrate if they managed to keep occupancy even for the year.
Yes.
And that's very frustrating when you're working hard to stay even. But since then, you know, the vacancies have largely filled up. And so
Mhm.
that's a good, if you want a very simple indicator of, well, should we start to think about building new sites in a given market? Well, are we 97, 98, 99% occupied? If we are, I mean, that's telling us something,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
that there's a demand for sites in the area. And then we need to think about the dollars and cents. And so if we can take the income that these sites would produce, you know, based on market rents, or maybe even next year's, you know, market rents if rents are going up each year,
Right.
and then work through a formula to get a net operating income, you know, per site, and then use a cap rate, which I'm sure you've covered on other calls, to get a value for
Right.
what would that site be worth when it's
Right.
occupied. And then we work backwards from there and say, well, we should have some profit, so let's take maybe $10,000 a site off for our developer profit. Now we
Right.
look at what's left and we say, we tally up our cost, land improvements, grading, water line, sewer line, utility lines, concrete roadways, you know, all the stuff. And let's not forget, you know, the designer, the engineer, the permits, impact fees, et cetera, et cetera. And we say, can it work?
Right.
And during a recession, it doesn't work.
Right.
But now, with all the appreciation that we've had in single-family housing, with the increase in rents in multifamily housing, and with the growth in rents and other manufactured housing communities, which now are mostly full, now all of a sudden the numbers work
Yes.
where they
And
didn't before. Same market area, you could have the same piece of ground where
sure.
5 years ago the numbers didn't work, today they do. And
And not
so,
only that, Roderick, but I'm sure you're seeing the, you know, the cheap interest rates and the lenders' enthusiasm for lending. They can't find enough commercial loans, and
right,
so you have,
sure,
in the past, that's always been a bottleneck. That even if you could get the zoning, which is the trick in and of itself, but then can you get a bank to, will the bank fund you?
right,
You
right,
know,
And
Joanne,
yes.
that's the reason why Roderick and I get along. He knows so much about numbers. To give you a clue, he's been trying to teach me what cap rate is for the last 20 years, and I still don't get it.
Well, I think we're going to have another show where we'll have Rodney can conduct the show, and because I think there's many, many, many misconceptions about what is a cap rate, and that is an important, very important concept. But what Roderick is saying is, for our listeners, is that he will help you back into the value of the ground once it's developed. Once you take, you know, pay for all the costs, because every developer wants to know, well, can I make any money if I do this? If I take on all this risk and all the work and time and effort involved, am I going to make any money? And so that is always the big question. And Roderick, and I know you have I think you have a CD or a DVD on the development process also. Is that
yeah,
correct?
that's true. That's true, and usually I offer those for sale at the convention. But if someone's interested in that and they're not coming to the convention, they can just call me on the phone.
And buy that. And
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
got
you
that
bet.
um, DVD, and it's extremely well conceived and put together. We only have 2 minutes left, and so let's, Don, is there any, I'm going to ask you both if there's any last comments that you want to make about what you do or your event in Las Vegas. So Don, let's start with you.
Well, Joanne, I really thank you for giving us this opportunity. As long as Roderick and I have been in the industry, we're kind of missionaries and have a strong belief in what we as an industry can do to provide decent housing for people who aren't at the top of the food chain, but down the food chain a lot. So we just relish the opportunity to meet with people and to get them steered in the right direction and end up with wonderful places for people to live.
Yeah, that's very well said, Don. How about you, Roderick?
Well, I would say, you know, I've been in the industry for 30 years, and what I've noticed through 4 business cycles, I think, boom and bust cycles, it's been my observation that the people in the long term that have all the money are the community owners. Retailers come and go, even manufacturers come and go. When the market's hot like it is right now, factories make tons of money. I mean, they print money, and then when the market's bad, they give half of it back.
Sure.
But the community owners typically don't do that. I mean, community owners can struggle during a downturn, true, but not like a retailer will struggle or like a factory will struggle. And so I think in the long game, the money in the industry is community ownership. And, you know, there's nothing finer than building your own community from scratch, you know, so you're in it at cost, you know, as opposed to paying, you know, perhaps an inflated price for someone else's, and then filling that up and then holding it long term.
That's very well said, Roderick. It's a very long-term process, but on the other hand, the market is so heated up, and as you pointed out, Don, the parks that are available tend to have a lot of problems. And so if one were to build a park, one would have the option of holding it long-term, as Roderick just said, or selling it and making probably quite a lot of gain on that development.
Joanne, I would like to mention just a couple other things real quick.
Sure.
This year, we are going to focus a little bit on a product called the Park Model. And